Well, this is page 1 for World Civilizations, chapter 1, and it's titled The First Humans. Our time period is prehistory to 3500 BC. Of course, prehistory or prehistoric means that it's the time before history, and a history, of course, is a written record. So it's the time before things were written down or language existed, for the most part. There were cave paintings, there were stories that were passed down, but as far as a written language, most didn't exist. So by definition then, prehistory, the time before writing was developed. So obviously people were speaking, but they didn't have a written language until later on. Second one is archaeology, study of past societies through an analysis of what people left behind. So things like tools or weapons, clothing, shoes, those types of things may not have lasted. It had to be something that had substance to it in order for it to be found later to survive the elements and all of the upheaval in the world, physical things going on with the earth. It had to be something of substance to last. And we often think of Indiana Jones when we talk about archaeology, but you know, it's not always, for the most part, as glamorous as what that is portrayed in the movies. They're great movies to watch, looks fun and exciting, but for the most part, it's like this. Very tedious work, a lot of patience, not a lot of exciting things going on, just sitting, laying, and just carefully digging those items out. Now before, they might use a pick and shovel. Now it's brushes and dental picks and very carefully trying to get those things out. So an artifact is an object made by humans, like a tool or weapon. Spearheads, arrowheads, those types of things would last. Pottery, jugs, stone tools, anything like that would really have a good chance of lasting. Anthropology is the study of human life and culture. So for the most part, when the item was taken out by an archaeologist, then the anthropologist would be the person to then study it. And they may study where it came from, what environment that it was found in, and that can help them understand a lot about the people that lived at that time. Some of these fields carry over. You could be an archaeologist and have an interest in anthropology, or vice versa. Paleontologist, I believe, is someone who studies bones, and there's a field that crosses over between these two that's called paleoanthropologist. And of course, last year in geography, we studied culture, and that is the way of life of a society. Anything basically about our life is culture. Our religion, our music, our clothing, architecture, transportation, education system, government, sports, holidays, celebrations, anything like that would be part of culture. Okay, fossils, they can be found in 3 different ways, and fossils are rock-like remains of biological organisms. So it was something that was alive, and then the circumstances had to be right in order for it to become fossilized. Typically it would be buried fairly quickly before it could decay, but it would be buried, and then that sediment that buried it would become hardened. Water would pass through that sediment, and then it would be an atom by atom exchange. The minerals in the water would replace the minerals in the biological organism. And so we have a replica, like that trilobite. We have a replica of what it looked like. It's the actual size, shape, but the internal structure is totally different. The actual structure of that organism is gone, and it's replaced by minerals from the rock, or from the water, sorry, but they become rock-like. This is amber, so this is like a mosquito or something trapped in amber. If you've watched the Jurassic Park movies, of course, this is the basis of the movie, and it's very plausible. It definitely is something that's possible. It could happen. So they inject a needle in there, they draw blood out of the mosquito, and if they have been feeding on dinosaurs, then they could clone the dinosaur. I mean, it's a very, I don't think we've seen from the movies, not something we want to do, but I think it is possible. Here's another type of fossil, one that, and it's similar to the top one, but there's one that I think is really exciting, and there's a video that I have that'll show this, is Mary Leakey, which we'll talk about here, her and her husband, but she was on an expedition that found footprints from like 3 million years ago. And I think these are very exciting. You can actually see where these people were and where they were walking. They had muscle and tissue on those bones that are moving across that, and they left those footprints. So how do we know how old things are? Well, they can date those artifacts and fossils. They usually analyze the soil that's by that organism. Radiocarbon dating, everything has carbon in it, and it breaks down over time, and I think they call it a half-life. They can figure out the half-life of that carbon, and through that they can figure out fairly close how old something is. Now, if you're looking at 3 million years, you might be off by 50 or 100,000 years, but still, for a 3 million, that's fairly close. And then thermoluminescence, where they take a laser and there's a piece of the dirt or soil, and they zap it with that laser, and it can give off a chemical, and they can analyze that. Okay, hominid is a human-like creature that walked upright, and the earliest hominids lived in Africa approximately 4 million years ago. And in your book on page 15, there's a chart across the top that shows some of these hominids. And we'll get to one of those here in a bit, but it shows the shape of the skull and how the brain size changed over time. Now, as you look at these, you might say, well, those first ones are definitely ape-like. Certainly the last 4 would be human-like. Maybe these two, there's some crossover. So who knows? I mean, like I say, if you don't believe in evolution, that's fine. It's a theory that's out there. I'm not so sure I believe in it. I think maybe there's a lot of unanswered questions. Maybe some of our ancestors did look like this. Who knows? We as human beings are changing. And when you're talking about millions of years, who knows? Okay? So here's Dr. Lewis and Mary Leakey. They found pieces of bone in Olduvai Gorge. That's in the country of Tanzania. And Olduvai Gorge is part of the Great Rift Valley. The Great Rift Valley is a huge gash in the earth on the eastern part of the continent of Africa. I believe, if I remember right, something like 120 Grand Canyons could fit in the Great Rift Valley. The interesting story about these two is they had spent like 25 years looking for artifacts, a bone of a human being, anything like that. They had found lots of animal bones, probably some artifacts and things, but what they really wanted was some bones from a hominid or early human. And one day, Dr. Leakey wasn't feeling quite well, so he stayed back at their camp, and Mary Leakey was out looking, just casually looking one day, and she happened to look down, and there was a jawbone. And so she went back to camp, got Dr. Leakey, they went back out, started to dig around, and they found, I believe, parts that almost completed a skull. So for them, that was a big find. For a lot of the archaeologists, anthropologists, to come across something like this, that's amazing. But the next one, this one in my opinion, he is very lucky. Okay, Dr. Donald Johansen found part of a skeleton in Ethiopia. And again, it's not just him. He's not the only one out there looking around. He has a team with him. And so, since he's the doctor and the leader of the team, then of course he's given the credit for it. But many of the people helped him to find those. They were listening to a Beatles song the night before, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and that's why the next day when they found this female adult, which was only 3 feet tall, they named her Lucy. So amazing. The Leakeys found a skull, parts of a skull. This team found a 40% complete skeleton. And that's amazing. And then, if you remember from the video, the next season, they found more remains from, I believe it was 37 to 35 something to 65 different individuals, bone fragments from that many different people. So pretty amazing. So I think he's very lucky. Okay, Australopithecus, or the southern ape of Africa, and they flourished in the southern and eastern parts of the continent of Africa. And so this is where it is in your book. The very first picture is Australopithecines, about 4 million BC. That's a big word, and there's a little Far Side joke by Gary Larson. The one guy, it says primitive spelling bees. So the first guy, cave, C-A-V-E, cave. And the guy next in line, he's thinking to himself, oh sure, I'll probably get Australopithecus. And so, anyway. Okay, this is our final one. I've got these 3 all grouped together because they kind of are similar, and they go along with the book as well. Homo habilis, handy human. They may have used stone tools, weapons, may have used those, made them. Homo erectus, or upright human. So one that walks more upright. Arms and legs are in modern proportions. And then Homo sapiens, wise human, showed rapid brain growth, and they mastered fire. So we have Homo habilis, which we talked about. Then there's Homo erectus, and then the last one, the Homo sapien, would be the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon, which of course we are considered the last one as far as appearance. In fact, a more specific subdivision would be Homo sapiens sapiens, for the more modern human being. And this one mastered fire. And of course the question I ask is, how did they discover fire? Most of the students will answer lightning. So they just had to wait until lightning struck, and then they could have fire. Eventually they would realize, oh, we've got to keep this going. So they had somebody be the fire protector or whatever. Eventually they might learn how to start it. Maybe somebody is out making arrowheads and they're chipping rocks. And if there's dry grass in front of them and they do that, it may start on fire. Well, did they actually see the spark, or did it just start on fire? If it just started on fire, it may have to happen 2 or 3 more times before they realize, whenever I'm doing this, a fire starts. So if they have a chance at evening or dark, when they're chipping something, they could see the spark and realize that maybe that's what starts it. But in a lot of these cases with different things, trial and error, a lot of time passing and being exposed to a lot of the same things is what allowed them to learn and do the things that they did. So that's the end of our page 1, and I have another little Far Side joke. This one is titled Primitive Resumes. So the interviewer says, let's see, you make fire, good. You make tools, good. You hunt mammoth, okay, uh-oh, your references are all baboons. So that's not good.